What kind of movie shall we see?
Something short.
That's very flattering. Wait till I tell the missus.
Launched in September 1982, Cheers was not an instant hit, but a risky gamble by NBC. A small bar in Boston, a few unfamiliar faces, conversations revolving around beer, love, and failure. No one believed such an ordinary story could survive in the golden age of American television. Yet, from a bleak start with a ranking of 77 out of 100, Cheers rose to the throne of sitcoms, becoming an icon of the entire 1980s. But did you know, behind the friendly laughter at the bar counter were simmering cracks? Cheers nearly got cancelled after its first season, had an episode about HIV buried forever, and witnessed an actor being erased for carelessly mocking a co-star on radio. Behind that seemingly warm bar was a world full of drama, where laughter was sometimes just a way to forget the pain. Let's explore the 20 strangest truths hidden behind the scenes of Cheers, the show that turned beers and casual chats into an unrepeatable monument. 20. When Cheers was nearly axed in its first season. In September 1982, while America was flooded with lively sitcoms and blockbuster TV shows, NBC launched a show that seemed to have no future. Cheers. No grand setting, no big stars, just a small bar tucked deep in a Boston basement, where a few nameless patrons gathered to talk about liquor, work, and petty sorrows. From the very first week, the show hit rock bottom, ranking 77 out of 100, practically a death sentence for any series at the time. In NBC's meeting rooms, people were already discussing pulling the plug. The producers fell silent. The cast could only wait for the cancellation order. Yet, in the midst of that despair, Brandon Tartikoff, the young entertainment director at NBC, made an unconventional decision. He stood up, slammed his hand on the table and said, "Give them time. I believe the audience hasn't yet realized they're watching something wonderful." No one expected that this statement would save Cheers from an early demise. Gradually, the first viewers began to connect, seeing the bar as a second home. With each airing season, the audience grew, until Cheers transformed from a miserable failure into one of America's most beloved sitcoms. One man's persistence changed the course of television history and launched an 11-year journey that could never be replicated. What would have happened if Brandon hadn't spoken up for Cheers? Share your thoughts in the comments. 19. The role of Sam Malone was once a different athlete, and a sudden pivot made history. When Cheers was still on the drawing board, the central character Sam Malone was envisioned as a former football player, strong, rugged, exuding a true man vibe. The writers tailored the role for Fred Dryer, a former NFL defensive star who made stadiums roar every time he stepped onto the field. They believed this archetype would draw male viewers, turning Cheers into a story about a fallen athlete rediscovering faith after his glory days. But then Ted Danson walked into the audition room. No muscles, no ferocity, just a dreamy gaze and a half-drunk, half-sober smile. At that moment, the room's atmosphere shifted. He didn't resemble a football player, but he radiated a strange allure, both confident and fragile, as if the bartender carried a past more fractured than anyone imagined. Creators Glenn and Les Charles took a gamble. They rewrote the entire character, turning Sam into a former baseball player, a romantic, weathered figure, enough to bring depth to the man behind the bar. That seemingly small change became a fateful turning point. Sam Malone in Cheers was no longer a muscular hero, but a failed man, trying to act cheerful while carrying an unshakable loneliness. Ted Danson turned this character into the soul of the series, the connector of all, both bar owner and a symbol of the longing to rediscover oneself amid life's drift. From then on, Sam Malone became one of the most immortal names in American television. If Ted Danson hadn't shown up and taken this role, who do you think would have been suitable? Share your picks in the comments below. 18. 2 minor roles with one line each, but they became the soul of the bar. On the first day of casting, Cheers was only looking for 2 minor actors to set the mood. George Wendt walked into the audition room, received a slip of paper with a single line. "Beer!" He delivered it naturally, without exaggeration, but the entire room burst into laughter at its sheer ordinariness. The role was his immediately. Next, John Ratzenberger auditioned for the same character. Upon hearing the role was taken, he didn't leave, but asked a question that silenced everyone. "What New England bar doesn't have a know-it-all who argues about everything all day?" That comment made writers Glenn and Les Charles look at each other and burst out laughing. A new idea was born on the spot. They created the character Cliff Clavin, the postal worker who considers himself the bar's encyclopedia. John was invited back to the set, while George became bar deity Norm Peterson, the man greeted with the familiar Norm that American audiences echoed for a decade. From two minor roles meant to fill space, Cliff and Norm became the soul of Cheers. They weren't handsome or famous, but they represented what millions of viewers found in that bar: familiarity, warmth, and the feeling of being called by name after a long, tiring day. 17. A real-life patron walked straight into television. Les Charles, one of the two brothers who created Cheers, once worked at a small bar after graduating college. Every evening, a middle-aged man would walk in, hang his coat on a chair, smile wearily and say, "Just one drink, Les." But he never stopped at one. Glass after glass, his laughter blended with the clink of glasses and the old jazz tunes in the smoky air. Whenever the phone rang, Les would hear a woman's voice on the other end ask, "Is my husband there?" And the man, without turning his head, would mutter, "Say I'm not here." That story haunted Les for years. When writing Cheers, he brought that patron's image into Norm Peterson, the man who found more peace in the bar than in his own home. Norm was no hero, with no grand dreams, but that's exactly why he became a symbol of America's middle class. People living simply, finding small joys after exhausting work hours. From an anonymous bar patron, Norm walked straight into television, becoming a familiar face across America. 16. Norm's invisible wife was far from a stranger. Throughout Cheers' 11 seasons, audiences frequently heard Norm complain about his wife, Vera, a figure everyone was curious about, but who never appeared. Vera existed only through stories, phone calls, and sometimes a shouting voice on the other end of the line. She was the most famous, invisible character on 1980s television. Few knew that Vera's voice belonged to Bernadette Burkett, George Wendt's real-life wife, who played Norm. Bernadette was invited to the studio to read a few lines for fun, but her sharp, witty and commanding voice convinced the producers to keep her permanently. By season 3, she even appeared on screen as Cliff's love interest, creating a humorous paradox that fans still recall as Cheers' greatest backstage joke. The story was both charming and bittersweet. On screen, Norm avoided his wife. In real life, his wife was watching him from the recording booth. A small detail, but a perfect reflection of Cheers' spirit, where every story, joyful or sad, hid a subtle smile and a touch of everyday irony. What do you think about this strange detail of the show? Let's discuss in the comments. 15. The boldest sitcom script in history, buried forever. In 1988, Hollywood faced a crisis. The Writers Guild of America launched a widespread strike, leaving hundreds of scripts unfinished, including a never-filmed Cheers episode that became legendary. The script told of Sam Malone receiving news that a former lover tested positive for HIV. In an era when America was still panicked, fearful, and prejudiced about the disease, the idea was deemed too risky. According to surviving drafts, Sam would confront his panic at the thought of being infected, forcing him to reflect on his entire past, his romances, and his recklessness. The episode was planned as a serious turning point, exposing the darker side of a character known only for jokes. But when the strike hit, NBC seized the chance to shelve the script entirely, believing audiences weren't ready to laugh alongside HIV fears. Since then, the episode vanished from all archives, mentioned only by a few crew members with regret. Had it aired, it might have changed how American television viewed illness and sexuality. Yet, instead of making waves, the buried episode remained in the shadows, becoming Cheers' greatest mystery. 14. A real-life joke led to a character's brutal fate on screen. Jay Thomas, who played Eddie LeBec, Carla's husband, the former hockey player, was once a beloved supporting character. A romantic, funny, and quirky ex-athlete, Eddie brought a fresh breeze into Carla's life. But one careless remark cost him everything. During a Los Angeles radio interview, Jay was asked what it was like working with Rhea Perlman, wife of star Danny DeVito. He laughed and quipped, "Brutal, man. It's brutal kissing her every day." The comment spread like wildfire. By the next day, the rumor reached the set. Rhea said nothing, but the writers got the message. When the next season began filming, they wrote Eddie a cold fate. While performing on ice, he was run over by a Zamboni, a death both absurd and cruel. No funeral, no farewell. Just a newspaper headline. Eddie LeBec dies in a freak accident. That death became a textbook example of Hollywood karma, where a single wrong word could bury a career. From a beloved supporting role, Eddie LeBec became a symbol of cold punishment on screen. 13. A special scene watched by 80 million people, then vanished without a trace. On January 30th, 1983, millions of Americans eagerly awaited Super Bowl XVII. Just before the opening whistle, NBC unexpectedly aired a short, minutes-long clip. Sam, Diane, Carla, Norm, and Cliff sitting around the bar, arguing about which team would win. Laughter rang out, dialogue snapped, and it ended with the line, "Don't bet, drink with us." That moment was seen by over 80 million people, Cheers' largest audience ever. But after that night, the clip vanished without a trace. Never rebroadcast, absent from DVDs, not even found in NBC's archives. Some believe the tape was lost during storage. Others think it was erased to avoid NFL copyright issues. The clip became a lost relic for collectors. Loyal Cheers fans have spent decades hunting for it, with no success. A mere minutes-long scene, yet it was a piece swallowed by television history, where laughter rang out and faded like the last sip of beer in the bar. Have you ever seen this clip? If so, share your story in the comments below. 12. Television's most perfect hair was just a stage secret. On screen, Sam Malone always appeared flawless. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, sparkling eyes, and jet black, impeccable hair. That hair became almost iconic, a part of the image of Boston's most charming man. But the truth was far from what viewers saw. Ted Danson had begun balding slightly before joining Cheers, and for over a decade, that hair was a meticulously crafted wig. He hid the secret so well that even co-stars rarely saw him without it. Only in 1990, when accepting an Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor, did Ted step onto the stage with his real, thinning hair, a simple look, and a relieved smile. The audience erupted, and TV viewers were stunned. From then on, the press called him the man who dared shed perfection on live TV. Ted's wig story wasn't just a fun backstage tidbit, but a symbol of Cheers' spirit. No matter how much glamour you hide behind, what audiences love is the real person behind the bar. 11. Frasier's great role was nearly played by an Oscar nominee. When Cheers began casting for the psychiatrist Frasier Crane, Diane's new love interest, they sent the script to John Lithgow. At the time, he was a true movie star, fresh off 2 consecutive Oscar nominations for The World, according to Garp and Terms of Endearment. With his talent and fame, Lithgow seemed the perfect choice to add depth to the complex romance between Frasier and Diane. But Lithgow declined without hesitation. He said television was shallow waters, and he didn't want to dive into a sitcom. That decision seemed logical at the time, but opened a grand path. Kelsey Grammer was chosen instead. From an unknown stage actor, Grammer turned Frasier into one of Cheers' most beloved characters, an arrogant, lonely, and conflicted intellectual. After Cheers ended, NBC promptly produced Frasier, elevating the character to new heights. A role Lithgow once rejected became a television icon spanning 20 years. A brief refusal changed the entire history of American sitcoms. 10. From an overlooked minor role, an actor created a 20-year record no one could break. When Kelsey Grammer first stepped onto the Cheers set in 1984, he was signed for just 3 episodes. The psychiatrist Frasier Crane was a temporary detail, Diane's new lover to add drama for Sam Malone. But the moment Frasier spoke, his deep voice, haughty demeanour, and smug gaze instantly made audiences laugh. He wasn't funny by trying, but by being overly serious. The public's reaction was so strong that NBC had to overhaul its plans. Frasier went from a minor role to a mainstay, appearing throughout the rest of Cheers. When the series ended in 1993, the writers realised they couldn't let the character vanish. Thus, Frasier was born, a spin-off about the psychiatrist leaving Boston for Seattle, starting anew with his aging father and brother. No one expected the show to run for 11 seasons, win over 30 Emmys, and make Kelsey Grammer one of the rare actors to play the same character for 20 consecutive years. From an overlooked minor role, he crafted an unmatched record in sitcom history, turning Frasier Crane into a symbol of wit, loneliness, and proud humanity. 9. One face, 2 of television's most powerful mothers. In Cheers, Frasier's mother appeared briefly in a few scenes, but her voice and presence made everyone shiver. The role was played by Nancy Marchand, a veteran stage actress with piercing eyes and a gravelly voice like a knife. Years later, she returned to the screen as Tony Soprano's mother in The Sopranos, one of the most terrifying characters in TV history. The strange thing was that despite the decade-long gap, Nancy carried the same aura, intelligent, cold, and powerful enough to intimidate even the strongest men. In Cheers, she was a metaphor for Frasier's emotional wounds, a man who could never escape his mother's shadow. In The Sopranos, she embodied the old generation, controlling her son through guilt. Nancy Marchand didn't just play 2 roles, she bridged 2 eras of television, from light sitcoms to modern mafia dramas. Both flawed sons, Frasier and Tony, shared the same fear, the quiet yet ruthless presence of a mother. 8. The only Cheers star who never returned, and the shocking reason why. Throughout Frasier's 11-year run, nearly the entire Cheers cast reappeared at least once, except Kirstie Alley. She was the soul of Cheers' final seasons, playing Rebecca Howe, the sharp and ambitious bar manager. Yet when Frasier became NBC's new hit, Kirstie remained completely absent. The reason wasn't money or scripts, but belief. A devout Scientologist, Kirstie Alley believed that joining a show centered on a psychiatrist, a symbol of the mental therapy her faith opposed, was against her principles. She declined every invitation, even when Kelsey Grammer personally called to persuade her. Her absence shocked the entertainment world. American media called it the religious rift in sitcom legend. For many fans, it was a great loss. Rebecca Howe had represented strong, funny women struggling with themselves. In Kirstie's silence, people realized that sometimes what separates an artist from a role isn't the script, but belief. 7. A staged wedding to fool the studio audience. When Shelley Long announced her departure from Cheers after season 5, the production faced a dilemma. Diane Chambers, her character, was half of the iconic romance with Sam Malone. If news of her exit leaked, the storyline would lose its surprise, and the live studio audience would surely spread the word. To keep it secret, the producers devised an unprecedented plan. They staged a fake wedding between Sam and Diane. The studio was decorated like a real ceremony, and the audience was invited to witness it. As the couple exchanged rings, cheers erupted. Everyone believed they'd gotten their dream ending. But when the episode aired, viewers nationwide were stunned. The wedding was an illusion. Diane left Boston, and Sam stood alone in the empty bar, drinking by himself. That masterful deception was dubbed the perfect TV twist of the 1980s, proving Cheers didn't just create laughter, it could break hearts too. Did you fall for this brilliant trick? Let's discuss in the comments below. 6. When Cheers was remade in Spain and vanished after one season. Nearly 30 years after the original ended, in 2011, Spain's Antena 3 decided to revive the legend. They bought the rights, rebuilt the bar identical to Boston's, swapped beer for wine, and cast Alberto San Juan, a renowned stage actor, as the lead. The new version was heavily promoted, promising to bring Cheers' spirit back to Europe. But from the first episodes, Spanish viewers sensed something off. American comedy relied on fast-paced dialogue, bar culture, and New England's signature sarcasm, things impossible to replicate in Madrid's context. The situations felt forced, the dialogue lost rhythm, and the bar looked like a theatre stage. After 13 episodes, the network quietly cancelled the show. No farewell, no final broadcast. The Spanish Cheers vanished, leaving a bitter lesson. Some legends can't be copied, as their soul lies not in the setting or characters, but in an emotion that appears only once in history. 5. Ted Danson's decision forced an iconic series to end. In the spring of 1993, Cheers was still NBC's ace, holding a massive audience for over a decade. But at a sudden press conference, Ted Danson stood up, looked into the camera and said, "I think Sam Malone has told his whole story." That statement was like a thunderbolt. The crew was stunned. The network was rattled. A legendary series stood on the brink of ending because of one man's choice. NBC tried to salvage it. Writers proposed a new direction, having Woody Boyd, played by Woody Harrelson, take over the bar from Sam. Scripts were drafted, a new season planned. But Harrelson shook his head. He said bluntly, "Cheers is Ted Danson. Without Sam Malone, this bar has no meaning." That statement ended all hope. And so, after 11 years of making history, Cheers officially said goodbye. NBC announced the final episode's air date, an event broadcast live across America. As the screen faded to black, everyone knew an era had ended, all because one man chose to stop at the peak. 4. The farewell night where the cast cried, hugged and got drunk for real. On May 20th, 1993, thousands gathered outside Boston's Bull and Finch pub, the real-life bar that inspired Cheers. Inside, NBC hosted a farewell party for the cast. On TV, the finale aired. Outside, fans shouted familiar lines. When the screen went dark, cheers mixed with music. While inside the bar, real tears fell. Ted Danson hugged Rhea Perlman and George Wendt. Shelley Long, who had left the show early, returned, quietly shaking hands with her co-stars. Beer flowed endlessly. Everyone laughed, cried and drank. It was no longer a scene but a farewell ritual. No writer could script that moment, where actors, after 11 years playing lonely souls finding joy in a bar, truly became inseparable friends. As dawn broke, Bull and Finch remained lit. Inside, the Cheers cast, exhausted, drunk, but deeply moved, sat together in silence. They knew that leaving this door meant the legend would close, and it closed in the truest way, in drunkenness, laughter, and final embraces. 3. The on-screen couple that made the studio believe they were in love off-screen. From the first episodes, the chemistry between Ted Danson and Shelley Long exceeded the writers' expectations. Sam Malone, the carefree former baseball player turned bartender, clashed with Diane Chambers, the romantic, intellectual, and argumentative woman. They were like fire and water, both drawn to and infuriating each other. That contrast created a rare chemistry, convincing audiences they were truly in love off-screen. Every scene between Sam and Diane was an emotional battle. Ted's burning gaze and Shelley's trembling voice teetered between anger and passion. Backstage, their tension sometimes spilled over to the crew. The director once said, "Every time they filmed a breakup scene, no one dared speak. Everyone believed they were really falling apart." That romance spanned multiple seasons, leaving one of the most romantic and haunting moments in American television. When Sam and Diane said their final goodbye in their last episode together, Ted and Shelley cried for real. Cheers was a sitcom, but amid the laughter, there was a real love. Not between two people, but between art and genuine emotion. 2. The character meant to vanish became a television icon for 2 decades. Initially, Frasier Crane was created to fill the gap when Shelley Long left the show. A minor character, a talkative, annoying, slightly arrogant psychiatrist, was only meant to keep the story moving. But Kelsey Grammer gave Frasier a strange vitality. He didn't just deliver lines, he lived them, turning arrogance into humour and wisdom into loneliness. Audiences quickly fell for the character. In Frasier, they saw a scholar hiding his weaknesses, a soul needing to be heard, but only knowing how to speak. When Cheers ended, NBC immediately expanded that world with Frasier, and the unthinkable happened. A minor character became a legend, winning dozens of Emmys and captivating audiences for 2 decades. Frasier proved that sometimes a character isn't born from writers' calculations, but from the living energy of the performer. That energy turned a psychiatrist briefly appearing in a Boston bar into a timeless television icon. 1. The most ordinary man in America became a generation's icon. Norm Peterson, the chubby, gentle man always sitting at the bar's corner with his familiar beer, became one of America's most beloved figures. Every time he entered, the crowd shouted in unison, "Norm!" A small but warm ritual, like a nation greeting a dear friend. George Wendt, who played Norm, was never a big star. Yet somehow, he made audiences see themselves in that image. An ordinary man, tired after work, just wanting a place to sit and feel he belonged. Norm had no ambitions, no victories, no tragedies, just a small, real life that moved viewers to tears. For 11 years, Norm didn't change, but the world around him did. Amid the glamour, he sat there, laughing, drinking beer, telling mundane stories. When Cheers ended, Norm remained at his corner, a symbol of America's middle class, simple, resilient, and believing that no matter the chaos outside, this little bar would always open its doors to welcome him back. Cheers wasn't just a sitcom, but a mirror reflecting the American soul for over a decade. The show perfectly blended humour and sadness, drunkenness, and profound everyday philosophies. Each character carried a piece of real humanity, flawed, lonely, but full of heart. That's why Cheers lives on as an irreplaceable icon of 20th century television. If you love backstage stories behind Hollywood legends, hit like to support us. Don't forget to share and subscribe to our channel to catch more videos about the classic films you've always loved.